what I think we're going to see over the final 5 games, which is kind of what we saw Sunday night. I don't know if it'll lead to victories, but I don't think they're going to get their ass kicked like they did against Seattle, Detroit, Kansas City, Dallas, right in a row, those 4 losses. This from Henry H. Henry H. writes, Kevin, I was glad to hear how positive you were about the loss to Denver. And then he wrote parenthetically, they lost the game in overtime 27-26. Yes, I'm aware of that, Henry. I am. And I guess for the most part, I was positive yesterday about the loss. Not that I, was like, way, yay, they won the game, or it felt like a win. No, it didn't feel like a win. It was a loss. There's no moral victories, not in, late November. But I did feel good about a lot of what I watched for the second game in a row. And I have a feeling there's going to be a sense of that with 5 games left in at least 3 of them, maybe more than that down the stretch. Henry writes, the way they played gave me hope as well that next year will be different. And this year, as you said a few weeks ago, will be a blip. Yeah, we had that conversation about, was last year a fluke or is this year a blip? I believe this year's a blip. I think that, the bottom line is really hard to evaluate a season in which you end up being the most injured team in the league. And as we've said many times, it's not just the injuries, it's that they've happened to their most significant players, their biggest contributors. Quarterback 1, wide receiver 1, running back 1, O-lineman number 1 early in the season, or certainly O-lineman number 2, D-end 1, D-end 2, D-end 3, safety 1, corner ultimately 1 and 2. Yeah, that just doesn't happen. That's a very unusual situation for a season. So I am never going to get off that. I know some of you, like to say, yeah, that's just an excuse. I mean, you guys keep sending me these various things that people in the market are saying about injuries. I couldn't care less. I've watched football my entire life. I know that these things impact seasons more than anything else does, other than the quarterback position itself. Period. That's the history of this league. The healthiest teams win, the unhealthiest teams lose. The healthiest teams win more than they lose. The unhealthiest teams lose more than they win. And when you're without your number ones in a bunch of different spots, including the quarterback, which is the most impactful presence on an NFL team, other than the health of your team, well, the health of this team included not having the quarterback for 6.5 games. So that's it. Now, how do we handle it? Well, they're starting to get some of these players back. And I want to see what it looks like because I waited a whole off season. We spent a whole off season. Fortunately, our off season last year didn't start until the very end of January, early part of February, because they went to the Final Four, the NFC Championship game. And we had the month of February, the month of March, April, May, to really talk about what they needed and build it up, because there was more hype and there was more expectation and more optimism around this last season than any in the last 20 or so years. I mean, 2013. We've talked about some of the others that we were excited about, but nothing like this. Nothing like this where you're coming off a true deep run into the postseason. They hadn't had one of those in 33 seasons. You had to go all the way back to 91. To find that, the 91 season, to find a deeper run. So, yeah, I mean, I invested, you guys invested in talking about this season, getting excited about the season, and we haven't had an opportunity to see the season as we envisioned it. It just didn't materialize that way. We didn't have the players for it to materialize that way. We can speculate, we can have all the conversations we want. If they hadn't had all these injuries, what would they have been? Well, they wouldn't be 3-9. They'd probably through 12 games be somewhere around 500 is my guess. And I say that because I do think after watching this season, even with all of the players that we didn't think would be playing for this team, I do think the defense was going to be a liability for the second straight year. I do think that was going to be the case. I was hopeful, didn't know hopeful before the season started, but I think it would have been a liability against a much tougher schedule. And therefore, instead of being 7-5, which is where they were through 12 games last year, remember that, they got to that 7-2, and then they lost 3 straight games. They lost to Philly, Pittsburgh, and then Dallas at home. I think that was the 3 losses that dropped them from 7-2 to 7-5. And then they went on the run to finish the season, to finish 12-5, win 2 playoff games, and nearly get to the Super Bowl. And I say nearly, I mean, they were within 60 minutes of going to the Super Bowl, even though that game was not very close. Those were the 3 losses in a row, right? And that dropped them to 7-5. I'm looking it up just to make sure. And then what did they do? They won their last 5 games? Yeah, that's exactly what happened. It was actually Pittsburgh first, my fault, then Philadelphia, then Dallas, and then they rolled off Tennessee, New Orleans, Philly, Atlanta, and Dallas to go 12-5. So this year's team, I think it would have been, with the schedule they have faced, it wouldn't have been 7-5 or better through 12 games. I think it would have been 6-6 more likely than not, maybe 5-7. Who knows? We could have been sitting here with a healthy football team, still disappointed about the results, but still with some hope with 5 games left after going through a brutal stretch. Think about it. Chicago, the number 1 seed. Dallas in the playoff mix. Kansas City is the worst of the teams other than Miami that we've faced, although Miami's now on a roll. It didn't just start with us. Miami beat the Bills, remember, leading into the Madrid game. They've now won 3 in a row in 4 of their last 5. They're actually, in the hunt at 5-7 in the AFC. But after going through a brutal stretch, Chicago, Dallas, Kansas City, Seattle, Detroit, the Dolphins in Madrid, and then Denver at home, we would have looked at it at 5-7 with a healthy football team and said, hey, there's a shot. There's still a chance. And look, we get in. Anything can happen. We saw that last year. But we're not at 5-7. We're at 3-9 because of everything that has happened to this team. But back to Henry's note, the way they played gave me hope, Henry writes, that next year will be different. Yeah, I mean, these NFL seasons are their own entities. Every year is totally different. Look at this year right now. I mean, just the standings alone. Nobody had New England at the top. Nobody had, maybe some people had Jacksonville. Nobody had Denver, with Kansas City on the outside looking in. Baltimore on the outside looking in, although they've got a chance to win the division. Buffalo not really looking great. Philly struggling, Dallas surging, Chicago with the best record in the NFC. Carolina pulling off a victory as a 10-point underdog to get to 7-6 and within a half game. You just don't know how these seasons will unfold. We talk about it every year. It's just a dynamic league, and it's so contingent on things like, will you be healthy or won't you be healthy? And you can't predict that going into a season. So it's not like there's a regression to the mean model with injuries, okay? It's not the way it works. But, hopefully they won't have what they have next year. Hopefully the quarterback will be healthy. I know that's a concern, and it's not an unreasonable concern. And they can do some things with a lot of cap space. And 6 of their 7 draft choices to upgrade their team to a point where next year will look much better. And I think in watching what happened on Sunday night with Terry back in the lineup, with Deebo Samuel on the field healthy, really for the first time since the opener, with, who am I forgetting now that was back? Will Harris, Deron Payne after missing a game. Who knows? Maybe they discovered something with Treylon Burks because he was on the field a lot. They certainly believed in him to a point where they didn't believe as much in Chris Moore as they did in Treylon Burks. I was looking at the snap counts for the wide receivers on Sunday night, and the snap counts went overall. Treylon Burks, Deebo Samuel, considered a wide receiver, had 70% of the snaps, followed by Burks at 66%. Chris Moore only in there for 28%. So Burks coming back, immediately they feel much better about him than they do Jalen Lane or Chris Moore. I know that the positions aren't exactly the same. Terry, 51%. I think they had him on a pitch count to play less than that. But yeah, it looks different. And it will look even more different with the starting quarterback back in the lineup if that happens. We're not sure it will or not. We've got some of the Dan Quinn sound from yesterday. They thought all along that Will Harris was a major loss when they lost him. He played in his first game back 79% of the snaps side by side with Quan Martin for most of it. Jeremy Reeves played in the game, but, obviously with Will Harris back, his snap count was way down. They're still without key players, no defensive ends that they started the season with. Maybe their best corner. He's a rookie. He was having a nice season as far as rookie seasons for corners go. Lattimore, none of us feel like there's a big loss there, but I bet you they feel like there's a big loss based on what they have in relief. I actually liked the way 31 played the other night, Jonathan Jones. I thought he played pretty well. And I thought Noah I played well. Igben Ogbonnia played, I thought, a good game, as he did last year when he had all those opportunities. So we'll see. I feel better about next year after Sunday night, Henry. I do. I think I was going to feel much better about next year regardless of what happened on Sunday night. But I was optimistic on, last week's shows, including Friday. I know I didn't do radio. I did a podcast and I previewed it. And I thought there was a chance because Denver wasn't as lethal offensively as even Miami is at times, but certainly not what Seattle or Detroit are. And I thought that they could hang in there a little bit. And I wanted to see what the defense looked like with Dan Quinn calling it for a second straight week. And I wanted to see what the offense looked like and how they'd scheme it up against the best defense in the NFL. But having some players back that matter, Terry McLaurin most notably, and most importantly, allowing Cliff Kingsbury to do some of the things that he just couldn't do, and the reliability of having your number one wide receiver back. So, yes, the way they played increased my optimism and hope that next year will be different. But I'm not even there yet. 5 games left. I'm not into draft position when there's not a regime change and when there's not a need for a quarterback. All right. Now, if when the season's over, I would love them to have the highest pick they can have. But 5 games left. We're basically talking about, a little less than a third of the season remaining. No, I want to see them come together, and I want to see them compete like they did on Sunday night, which I do expect them to do. I want to see them coached better, which it's easier to coach better when some of your key contributors are in the lineup. I want to see them win games. I want to see them beat Minnesota. I want to see them beat the Giants. And then I want as a 5-9 football team, I want Philadelphia to come here on December 20th needing to win and having that kind of, environment for a game. It'll be a road game, at home, just like the Dallas game will likely be a road game environment on Christmas Day at home. But I'd like to see that, and I'd like to see him get on a roll here. Get on a roll playing well, but getting on a roll winning games. And then I'll really feel differently about next year, even though you can make the case because NFL rosters change so much and teams change so much that there's very little that kind of goes from one year to the next. It's not all that translatable at times in this particular league. But I'd like to see it anyway. So the question to open up the show at 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980, phone lines are open, is did the way they played on Sunday night against the best defensive team in the league? I actually think it's Houston. So I would say Denver's number 2. I know some of the statistical advanced numbers out there would point to Denver being the best defense in the league. I actually think right now Houston has the best defense in the league. And I think Houston's a very dangerous football team in the AFC. If they get into the postseason, it's going to be they're going to have a chance to run the table and get to the Super Bowl and represent the AFC. It's kind of wide open. It's kind of wide open this year. Kansas City might not even be there. Baltimore might not even be there. And if they are there, will they even be themselves? Or will they be limping in at 8 and 9? You've got teams certainly like New England and Denver that are having great seasons, but no real playoff experience. Denver played the one game last year in Buffalo on Wild Card weekend. But do you feel like Sunday night lifted your spirits for next season? 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. It lifted my spirits, in all honesty, for what I think we're going to see over the final 5 games, which is kind of what we saw Sunday night. I don't know if it'll lead to victories, but I don't think they're going to get their ass kicked like they did against Seattle, Detroit, Kansas City, Dallas, right in a row, those 4 losses. Now, I say that if everybody goes down Sunday, Monday, on Sunday in Minnesota, if Terry gets hurt again, if Noah Brown comes back and gets hurt, if Jaden comes back and gets hurt, of course that changes the dynamic. But assuming they're a healthier team over these final 5 games, I think we're going to see a lot to be excited about. I know this is corny, but proud about, and it'll be more enjoyable to watch, as Sunday night was, even though I hated the ending.